Jackson County sheriffs tell us when they arrived to investigate an identity theft Friday, they instead discovered evidence of 2 murders. They say they found mutilated corpses.
All the pigs were there. And they're licking his head. I'm thinking, they need something to eat. They'll always need something to eat.
Knee joint, pieces of other bone.
How long have you had all those pigs? More than 10 years.
How long do they live?
Until I kill them.
Depends on when you butcher them. Where do you butcher your pigs at?
Right there in the barn.
Oh, you know how to do it?
I know how to kill them, and I don't necessarily butcher. I'm kind of a butcher when it comes to butchering.
Oh, okay. Not good at it, but you can do it.
Yeah.
How do you kill a pig?
Boom.
Oh. What kind of gun do you have to use for that?
22.
Oh, okay.
I'm not a good shot. I see a turkey 50 feet away and I'd shoot it and it'd go, ah! I'd jump up in the air and it'd run away and I'd shoot it again. And one turkey I had to shoot 4 times and it was halfway down my property before I actually killed the damn thing.
Monica makes a joke. So what we see, and we see this oftentimes in psychopathic individuals, is this glib, superficial attempts to be charming. She's using humor and she's laughing about killing animals. She's laughing about butchering animals. She's laughing about the fact that she's not a good shot. And there's no real indication at this point that she is connected to or in touch with why she's actually in that interrogation room. There's a missing person who she had employed at some point. This missing person was living on her property as a tenant.
Now, the other thing that I was kind of interested in, Susan, is here's a person that came to your house and is now clearly missing.
Yes.
You hadn't seen him for a while.
He had been gone over a month.
Okay.
Why didn't you call?
I didn't think it was my responsibility to call.
Susan Monica's demeanor shows that she's not taking any responsibility for the fact that she was the landlord. She was the employer for this person, and yet she says it wasn't my responsibility to call the police. It essentially is raising red flags. The idea that somebody could be missing, who you have regular contact with, and she refuses to do anything and says it wasn't even my responsibility to, is extremely callous.
We found a leg right next to your place.
A leg?
A human leg next to your place. I think it might be Robert.
Don't know.
Who could it be?
No idea.
Well, certainly if I found a leg by my house, I'd be freaked out.
Well, I'm not freaked out. But, very surprised. Yeah, no, I've heard of pigs eating people all the time. I've joked about it. I have a weird sense of humor. If you found a leg in the pig pen, I would say totally possible.
Susan Monica's outward emotional expression is really completely flat. They just told her, we found a leg on your property, to which she responds, a leg? And she states, well, no, I'm not freaking out. Then it's almost like she's searching for the right words. Like, what is it they want to hear from her? And she lands on, fairly surprised.
If my pigs did eat Robert, would you kill my pigs?
Well, I don't know. Susan, why don't you just start at the beginning? By what?
By the pigs.
Okay.
He was like half eaten by the pigs. It was early in the morning, and I saw what had happened. His guts were all over the place. He was he was still alive. I yelled at the pigs, and they were doing their thing. They're just, having lunch or breakfast. They were having breakfast on him. There was no way he was going to get to the hospital and live. I knew he wasn't going to be alive for more than a few more minutes. I went back up to my house and I got a gun and shot him in the head. I was afraid if I called you people, you were going to come out and shoot my pigs.
One common misperception is that psychopaths have no emotion. That's not the case. Psychopaths sometimes will show slight emotion, but only the things that matter to them. If you don't matter to them, they show no emotion to you. In this case, Susan Monica cared a lot about her pigs. And that's what she showed emotion to. Even when she saw the pigs eating him alive, she cared about the pigs, not him.
Has she ever killed a person before this?
No. While I was in the Navy, we took the boat up into Vietnam. If I saw something suspicious, I would throw a hand grenade at it. But I've never, at that time when I was, at war or whatever, or since, and even thought about shooting anyone.
So you value human life, right? It sounds like you do. It sounds like you have an understanding.
No, I don't.
Okay.
No,
Well,
I should not be saying it, but I'm trying to tell the truth. I do not value human life very much. My feeling is the only thing wrong with this planet is there's people on it. If it weren't for us, all the other animals, dodo birds and whatever else would still be here.
What we know about Susan Monica is she was born Stephen Buchanan. She served in the Navy for a brief period of time, was actually deployed to the Vietnam War. And after serving in the military and being in combat, when she discharged from the military as a man, as Stephen Buchanan, she began to live her life as a woman. I find myself wondering if that's part of what led Susan to live this very isolated existence on a farm, and why maybe she did not relate to humans, but was better able to relate to her pigs, because the pigs wouldn't have judged her. The pigs wouldn't have rejected her. Susan Monica may actually have found more peace and acceptance with this family of pigs that she raised than with human beings.
Why didn't you just shoot the pigs and make them stop eating Robert?
I didn't want to shoot my pigs. And
why? They're just pigs. He's a person. Did you not care for him?
I did not care for him.
Susan Monica seems to care much more about animals, pigs in particular, that she can control. They don't talk back to her. It's a very one-sided relationship, really. They do what she wants. And so individuals with psychopathy prefer relationships where they can dominate and exert control, whether it's with human beings or, in this case, with animals.
Every square inch of your property is going to be searched.
Okay. Just like Robert, it doesn't make sense. There is something else that I don't want to say that's just as bad. Oh, God, give me another piece of paper. Right there. About 3 feet down, there's part of another body. There was the skull and a couple other things I don't remember.
Okay.
His name is Steve. He's gonna kill himself. So, he shot himself in the head. He emptied the gun. He fired all 5 shots.
I've never heard of somebody shooting themselves 5 times in the head. I haven't.
It would certainly hurt.
Yeah.
And it's 5 shots for crying out loud.
Susan thinks she can tell that story to police and they'd be like, oh, okay, that's what happened. That someone could shoot themselves in the head 5 times. It strains credulity. The story kept changing, which shows she did not plan this out in advance. She didn't have an answer for why she killed him prepared, which shows her grandiosity. She never thought she was gonna get caught.
And then what happened?
Basically, I did the same thing. Which, like I say, it doesn't make any damn sense at all why 2 people would end up in my pig pen.
Yeah.
There's something really interesting going on right now with Monica, and it's what I think of as a cognitive leak. She says, I did the same thing, which suggests she's taking responsibility for both of these murders. But then she cleans it up. Sometimes when people are being interrogated, they start to fatigue and they experience increasing stress, and things are not as organized.
I'm gonna handcuff you.
Oh,
Yeah.
I don't want you messing up my place after me and Steve have put so much into it.
There's 2 dead people on your property. Are we not supposed to look for more? You expect me to believe there's no one else there?
You're saying that for the last 15 years I've been killing people? I'm saying that I certainly do not want to go to jail for any of this.
This is classic psychopathic trait. The fact that she's not taking any responsibility, even after saying essentially, yes, I did kill them, but I don't want to go to jail for it. I don't have to serve any punishment or have any comeuppance for this. Well, of course not, because psychopaths never think they should be held responsible.
If you killed somebody and put them somewhere besides your property, would you tell me?
Of course not. If I tell you where the 17 bodies out there, I'm going to be in jail for the rest of my life.
Susan, there's already 2 bodies. There's already 2 bodies.
I know that. When you go out and dig up a whole bunch of holes, I want you to cover up the holes. I don't want my property, which I've spent the last 20 years cleaning up, to look like a B-52 went over it.
Of all the requests that she could make, she's concerned about holes being filled up on her property, and 99% of the world does not ever have a dead body on their property, and Susan Monica has 2. And she's shown no concern for that. She's shown more concern for her pigs, but she's shown the most concern for holes being plugged up.
Now, you mentioned an incident to us where Susan held you into the pig area. Mm-hmm. Tell me about that.
She just lifted me up and held me over the pig farm. Because I was looking at her pigs, and she knows I'm scared of them. I'm scared of them.
Right.
I would never get in there. But anyway, I was looking at her, and she held me over and laughed. And then she told me, I would like to see how fast my pigs could get rid of a human body.
Individuals with psychopathic traits sometimes also have sadistic tendencies, which really aligns with the callous lack of empathy and lack of remorse. As he's telling this story, if you think back to also some of the details about the crimes, where she also watched the pigs have breakfast, as she described it, and all of those behaviors are certainly sadistic in nature and make you wonder, well, what else?
I'm scared, I'm angry. What are you scared of? Talk to me, Melissa. There's something inside that's bothering you. I guess I'm just scared that I don't know what he did. I don't know what he could have done.
A runner is gunned down out of nowhere today on the road near Wells Lake. In custody is one man, 24-year-old John Selesky.
Composure. Composure. Stop crying. Stop crying. Stop crying. Man, my Saturday.
Selesky is one of the two witnesses that is at the scene of the crime when detectives show up or when law enforcement shows up, and he's not protesting. He's not acting strangely. He's not giving them any reason to take pause that maybe he's got something to hide. They ask to search his vehicle, and he happily agrees. The other witness is wheelchair-bound, so he's not able to get out of his truck, but he's forthcoming with information, including that Selesky was already at the scene when he arrived. This runner has been gunned down in a very violent way with an assault weapon. It was done at close range, and multiple shots, any of which could have been fatal. And there doesn't seem to be anyone else around, so there's no indications of a struggle. It looks like it was an unprovoked attack.
Going into the interview, the detectives might have been wondering, given the way that Brent Morrison was killed, was this a personal vendetta? Was this some revenge that he was trying to get against a specific target? Or was it just completely at random? If so, what's the reason for that?
First off, I want to tell you, John's fine.
Is he in trouble?
Well, that's what we're trying to figure out. You work, does John work somewhere?
Just on the Sunday to bus and do janitorial services. He's in the Air National Guard and he goes to school.
Has he mentioned that there's been any disagreement, altercation with anybody?
No. As far as I know, he really doesn't have any friends here.
Do you know anyone by the name of Brent Morrison? Have you ever heard that name?
No.
The victim was Brent Morrison, a 44-year-old professional. He was an avid runner. What his wife confirms is that Selesky doesn't really have any friends or a social routine in town. And so that helps detectives to realize that there really is even less of a nexus to the victim. And it appears that this may have been a crime of a complete stranger. That maybe this is where we begin to see some of the narcissism in Selesky, that he has an idea of what people should be and that most people don't live up to that standard.
When am I going to see him again? And does he get to come home today, or do I have to wait?
There's been a homicide this morning. And it was out in the area of the nature center.
Why would you kill someone you didn't know? And why would you kill him so cold-bloodedly? And one possibility that comes to mind is this is a man who's completely repressed. He is sort of tightly coiled up, and he doesn't express himself.
She's just overwhelmed by the whole situation, but her reaction is also still at the same time somewhat deflated and restrained. And that restrained reaction makes me wonder if there is more going on. She's had concerns but dismissed them. And now when you look at those concerns overlaid on this crime, she has some things she's starting to put together. Ultimately, for any spouse, this would be a nightmare situation.
Hey, Joe, sorry, you in? I'm fine. You want something to drink?
No, no, thank you. John, we gotta talk to you about what happened after, okay?
Yeah.
Just tell me what happened and,
Oh, yeah. That's pretty much it.
Selesky's ability to stay calm and to stay in control of his narrative is somewhat striking. He knows he's committed this crime. He knows he's given authorities permission to search his vehicle, and they found the firearm. He seems to just be going about business as usual. He wants to preserve the story that he's telling authorities. And that quality is more consistent with what we see in psychopathic individuals. There's a shallowness to their affect or emotion. There's a lack of willingness to take responsibility for what they've done. There's generally a cool and calm about how they handle stress. And it's their own narcissism to some degree. They believe and confidently feel they can pull this off.
Well, we talked to some people that pretty much live out there. I mean, these people are runners. And, I mean, if they're not home sleeping, eating, they're on that street when they saw you out there. I can shoot that man. Listen, if something happened out there, we can figure this out. Okay? If something happened, let's just talk about it. Okay?
I was driving towards Little Lake, and I saw a squirrel. Stupid thing, I know. I just wanted to get it, and got my gun out from the back seat, and I tried shooting a squirrel. And I know that's not a good thing. I was on the street. I don't want to tell you because that's against the law here.
He's on a sinking ship, and he doesn't really know how to create a good story. So he comes up with a terrible story. He's, trying to figure out how to get out of this mess.
So yes, they've searched his car, they found the bullets, and the best story that he can come up with is that he was trying to shoot a squirrel. Maybe he thinks he's so smart, and these detectives are so dumb, they couldn't possibly put two and two together. That sort of grandiosity is also a trait of psychopathy. They manipulate, they lie, and they do what they need to get out of the responsibility of whatever it is that they've done.
Okay. Listen, you're still leaving out a few things, because like I said, we're pretty good at this. We're really good at this.
Right.
Well, in all due respect, in your own words, you mentioned right off the bat, you knew you wasn't supposed to have a gun out there. Secondly, I can tell you this, that gun was fired from inside that vehicle. Thirdly, now we've got someone that's lost their life with that gun. Do we need to continue?
We need to know.
We don't need no more of the stories. This is your opportunity to take the floor.
What's interesting is Selesky's body language shifts at this point in the interview, and now he starts nodding in agreement with the detective in the affirmative. As in, the detective is saying, I don't believe this story, and he's nodding yes. In other words, I agree with you, this is.
The detective said, you have a chance to take the floor now. He's feeding into Selesky's narcissism and grandiosity, basically, and saying, here, you lead. It's like the detectives are baiting him, and he's taking it.
Did you know him?
I don't know. Did you have words?
No.
He didn't upset you enough? You driving around enough?
No.
Tell me what happened. Okay?
I was in that spot. And
Take your time. Take your time.
Once he has taken the stage, he literally takes the stage. He pours on the theatrics. So now we see these shallow tears. We see him acting like he's overcome with emotion at certain parts of this, that he can't even tell the story. Individuals with psychopathy tend to have callousness and a shallow affect, meaning they know what to say or how to act, but it's not necessarily genuine. He's saying what he thinks they want to hear. He's acting upset. It's unclear if he's even upset that an innocent man was shot or if he's really just upset that he's caught. And everything leans toward the latter.
His last team wasn't really hard, and I went out there. I stuck that gun in my mouth, and I And then I saw him. He didn't look at me. He didn't know I was there.
Ultimately, it just doesn't hold true that this is someone who would switch from being suicidal to suddenly homicidal. We see this in the field often, that somebody, in order to either gain sympathy from the people who are interrogating them, or to start to lay the foundation for some kind of an insanity defense, might make a claim of suicidal ideation or an attempt to kill themselves, when in fact they were not attempting to kill themselves at all. It's nothing other than another tactic of manipulation, and it's just one of the tools they use in that toolbox.
You say he's sorry, did he say he was done?
No, he said he didn't.
No, okay. I just started shooting. It says in my mind that. And then I was contemplating pulling that trigger on me, and just the guy went through. Where were you aiming at? The back of the heart, like, inside mass.
When you shot him the first time, what happened?
He turned around real quickly and said, ow. Like, it was something like a bee or something. All he said was, ow.
We start to see the callousness with which Selesky engaged in this crime. He's talking about the victim's reaction after being hit the first time with this firearm and this bullet. And it almost seems like Selesky's offended by the fact that the victim didn't give him a more spectacular reaction, that all he did was say, ow, as if it was a bee sting or a bug bite.
How many times did you shoot him?
I don't know. I don't know. I lost count.
Shoot him front, back, side?
He was running away from me. I shot him in the back, and then he turned around, and I shot him again and again.
Selesky shot the victim 9 times. It's such a level of excess violence that he was getting a thrill out of what he did. There was no reason to continue to shoot this innocent individual who never fought back, didn't even see his perpetrator coming. You have to just think that not only was he on an adrenaline high and just kept going, but he wanted to be absolutely certain he hit his target.
At that point in time, what compelled you to shoot?
I felt so scared, like angry. I mean, like, so much is dead. My wife, like.
John, were you wanting to take this out on Melissa? Yeah. Let me ask you this, to be honest with you. Are you and Melissa still living together?
Yeah. You guys talking about divorce? She mentioned that, you guys.
He's losing control of his finances. He's losing control of his marriage. And rather than react in a way a healthy individual might, by taking steps to improve those problems, he decides to go the extreme, and he reacts in rage toward an innocent victim.
Did you take this anger out on that guy because of Melissa?
Because of many things. It wasn't just Melissa. It was just the whole world. For weeks now, like, leading up to this,
have you had thoughts about taking someone else's life?
Yeah. Like, just thinking, man, maybe this might make me feel better or something.
When Selesky talks about things were getting hard for him, you potentially have a situation of somebody who's an extreme narcissist, sees themselves in a very accomplished way. They're financially living off their spouse. They're living off of what might have been a GI Bill to go to school. They're starting to have problems in their classes. And if they drop out of school, they lose their money that they're contributing to the family to go to school. He was a janitor and a bus driver, and not that there's anything wrong with either of those careers, but for Selesky, these were all offenses to his ego. Selesky's decision to shoot and kill the victim speaks to how he sees people. They're objects, they're replaceable, they're substitutable. It's no different than a person choosing to line up soda cans or beer cans on a wall and engage in target practice. That's what he wanted in that moment, and that's what he decided to give himself.
Did you ever leave the area?
First went up there, yeah, and then the guy told him I was gonna look for first aid. I thought they had a first aid kit in the truck, but I went and didn't go back to my truck with my first aid kit. It wasn't there. I don't know what it was.
Were you actually going to use the first aid kit if you needed it, or was it just for show?
No, I wanted to help.
He shot this man, and now he's claiming, very theatrically so, by the way, that he wanted to help him with a first aid kit. It just doesn't mesh together. Using what he knows to try to manipulate the detectives even more. He knows he should be upset by this. That's the right response, to be crying and to say you wanted to help someone.
How long had you been sitting in the car before you fired the first shot?
Oh, I don't know. I was just in my car, thinking about things.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go for a walk. Called over a taxi, got my gun out.
You're sitting in the back seat with the windows down? All of them?
No. I actually, when I saw it coming out, I actually put that taxi window open. I didn't know if it would tell that my father was there.
You already passed your vehicle, or you were about to pass and you rolled the window down?
Jumping down, yeah.
You pretty upset? You're angry at this time?
Yeah.
It feels like there's an internal conflict. He's been thinking of hurting someone because he's so angry at himself and the world. Both of these things kind of meshing with each other. And he snaps. And so there's a suspension at the moment of the feelings that make us human, that make us be angry but not kill, that make us, understand what the taking of a life is. And so in that moment, the suspension of these feelings led him to act in ways that were really psychopathic.
Composure. Stop crying. Stop crying. Stop crying.
It's possible he is trying to rein himself back in from the theatrical show that he just put on, and he's trying to calm himself back down. It looks as if he's looking up at the camera at one point, intentionally, and thinking, I'm going to look a certain way, I'm going to present myself a certain way here while the cameras are rolling and no one else is in here. And maybe this will be helpful later on down the line.
The call comes in just before dawn, when the air is still and the radios hum low, and the voice on the other end sounds wrong, clipped and breathless like it's already running away from something, saying there's a car on County Road 417, headlights on, driver's door open, engine cold. No driver anywhere, and the road stretches out flat and empty as if it's holding its breath. The patrol cruiser rolls up first, tires crunching gravel, red and blue lights washing over mesquite and dust, and inside the car there's a purse on the passenger seat, a phone with a cracked screen, lipstick smeared on the console, keys still in the ignition. A detail that hits like a slap because people don't just leave their lives turned on and walk into the dark. By sunrise the tape is up, yellow cutting the road in half, and the name starts to circulate in low voices, then louder, then everywhere, until it's on the lips of the morning anchors and the coffee shop and the school drop-off line. A woman from town, 28, last seen leaving a late shift. The kind of disappearance that freezes a place mid-sentence. Texas in 2005 moves fast and slow at the same time. Highways roaring and back roads whispering. And this is one of those towns where everyone knows the sound of everyone else's truck. The crime scene photos show the sky bleaching from purple to blue. The long shadow of the open door stretching across gravel like a finger pointing nowhere. And investigators mark the ground, bag what they can, photograph what they can't explain. There's no blood. No struggle that anyone can see. Just absence. Just a silence that feels deliberate. They canvass the area. Knock on doors where dogs bark and porch lights flick on. Collect half memories and shrugged shoulders and one man who swears he heard a scream but can't say when. The phone records show a call dropped minutes before midnight. The last ping bouncing off a tower miles away. And the timeline tightens like a noose around a vanishing point. The victim's house becomes a shrine overnight. Flowers wilting in the heat. Candles melting down to waxy stubs. A photograph taped to the front window that catches the sun and fades at the edges. Her family sits in the living room with the blinds drawn, TV muted, waiting for a knock that doesn't come. And when the sheriff stands at the podium that afternoon and says they're following leads, that there's no evidence of foul play but they're treating it as suspicious, the words land wrong. Hollow, as if the town can hear the space where answers should be. The headline writers sharpen their verbs. Mysterious disappearance. Cold case in the making. Shock ripples through the community. The phrase last seen alive takes on weight. The investigation surges and stalls in waves. They find tire impressions near the shoulder that don't match her car. A witness claims a dark pickup idled nearby, engine rumbling, windows tinted. Another says they saw her arguing with someone weeks earlier. A shadow from a past relationship that refuses to stay in the past. Detectives chase a tip down to the border and back. Chase another into a dead end behind a closed bar where the smell of beer and bleach hangs in the air. They pull security footage from gas stations along the route she would have taken. Hours of grainy black and white where headlights smear into ghosts. They bring in dogs and the dogs circle and sit and circle again, confused by the absence of a trail, as if she evaporated. Weeks bleed into months. The case file grows heavy. The community grows restless. There's a vigil on the courthouse steps where a pastor speaks about faith and patience, and the candles gutter in a wind that won't cooperate. Rumors bloom in the cracks. Someone says she owed money. Someone says she was going to leave town. Someone else swears they saw her weeks later at a rest stop 2 counties over. Alive, thinner, eyes down, and that rumor refuses to die even when investigators say there's nothing to it. The phone turns up in a pawn shop, wiped clean. The serial number scratched like someone didn't want it to be remembered. A receipt surfaces from a hardware store for rope and tarps, paid in cash, but it's dated months earlier and leads nowhere. Every lead feels like it's almost something and then it isn't. By the first anniversary the word cold creeps in, quiet but persistent. A label no one wants but everyone recognizes. Cold case. The detectives rotate, the budget tightens, the interviews get fewer, the file gets shelved and shelved again. The family learns a new kind of waiting, one measured in press conferences and holidays and empty chairs. The town learns to live with a question mark, learns to glance twice at a car pulled over at night, learns that silence can be loud. Somewhere in the background, a man listens to the news and changes the channel. Somewhere else, a woman locks her doors earlier than she used to. Years pass. Technology changes. DNA databases swell like tides. Old evidence gets new light. A partial print once deemed useless gets scanned again. A fiber once ignored gets re-examined. A name that appeared once in the margins of a report, misspelled and dismissed, flickers back to life when a new detective reads the file like it's a fresh wound. He sees patterns others missed. He hears cadence in interviews, pauses that feel rehearsed. He notices the dark pickup mentioned by 2 witnesses, different descriptions, same absence of license plates. He pulls traffic camera data from a highway that didn't have cameras in 2005 but now does, backtracking registrations, building a net one thread at a time. Then, in a year when no one is watching, a match hits. Not a full confession. Not a smoking gun. A hit. Connection. A suspect whose name triggers a low hum in the room, someone tangential, someone who drifted through the town like dust and then vanished, someone who had access to a similar vehicle, someone who left the state weeks after the disappearance and built a life elsewhere. The arrest comes quiet, miles away, handcuffs clicking in a parking lot under fluorescent lights, the words read carefully, the face blank. When the news breaks, the headline writers can't help themselves. Cold case cracked. Suspect arrests shocks victim's family. Phones light up. The family's door fills with cameras again, years older, eyes wary, hope and fear colliding. But arrests are not endings. They're questions with handcuffs. In court documents, the language is precise and thin, allegations stacked on circumstantial pillars, timelines stitched together with inferences, a narrative that almost holds if you don't tug too hard. The defense pushes back, points to the gaps, the lost evidence, the contaminated chain, the witnesses who can't remember clearly after all this time. The suspect says nothing. The suspect's lawyer says plenty. The community splits quietly at first, then louder. Some want closure so badly they can taste it. Others feel the unease creep back in, the sense that something essential is still missing. The victim's family sits through hearings with hands clasped, listening to their daughter reduced to exhibits and dates, and when reporters ask if this brings peace, the answer catches in the throat. Peace requires certainty. Peace requires knowing where the road ends. Outside the courthouse, someone whispers that the arrest feels rushed, that pressure makes mistakes, that cold cases thaw unevenly. Online, anonymous comments turn sharp, accusing, defensive. Old rumors resurface with new venom. A former witness recants, then recants the recantation. A piece of evidence once thought lost turns up mislabeled in a storage room, and its significance is unclear. And still, the road where the car was found remains the same, flat and patient, swallowing headlights and secrets with equal appetite. At night, locals swear they can hear an engine idling there, just for a moment before the sound fades. The open door exists now only in photographs, but the question it opened never closed. Was this a crime of opportunity or design? Was the arrest a breakthrough or a mirage? Did the truth slip through the cracks years ago, or is it waiting stubborn and intact for the right light? The case sits in a strange state, no longer frozen but not resolved, a thaw that reveals as much mud as answers. The phrase cold case lingers in every article, every broadcast, a reminder that temperature is not the same as clarity. Somewhere, evidence waits to be understood. Somewhere a memory sharpens. Somewhere, someone knows exactly what happened on County Road 417 before dawn, when a car was left running and a life stepped into the dark, and the town has been listening for footsteps ever since. The file doesn't sleep. It waits. In a climate-controlled room that smells faintly of cardboard and disinfectant, boxes sit stacked with dates written in black marker, and one of them carries the weight of a town's unanswered questions. When the arrest hits the wires, the box comes back to a metal table under fluorescent lights, opened again, its contents fanned out like a deck that's been shuffled too many times. Photos curl at the edges. Reports hum with the static of old assumptions. The new detective reads every page aloud in his head, hearing not what's written but what's missing, the spaces where certainty should live, the pauses that sound like held breath. He starts with the road. County Road 417 isn't special on a map, just a thin line that connects nowhere to nowhere, but maps lie. He drives it at night, windows down, listening, counting seconds between mile markers, noting where cell service drops, where a truck could idle unseen. He imagines headlights cresting the slight rise, the open door catching on gravel, the choice made in a heartbeat or planned over weeks. He stops where the car was found and steps out, feels the wind push against his jacket, hears insects churring like a clock that won't stop. He marks distances with his feet, then with a measuring wheel, building a physical memory to replace the abstractions in the file. Back in town, the past refuses to stay past. A waitress remembers a regular who stopped coming around that winter, tipped heavy, asked odd questions. A mechanic recalls a truck with a rattling exhaust, windows too dark, brought in for a quick fix and paid in cash. A clerk at a 24-hour gas station recognizes a face from a lineup and then isn't sure, then is sure again after sleeping on it, certainty rising and falling like a fever. Each memory comes with qualifiers. Might have been, could have been, sounds like. The detective logs them anyway, a constellation of maybes that could, with the right pressure, snap into a shape. The suspect's name sits in the center now, typed in bold, circled, underlined, a gravity well pulling old facts inward. He wasn't new to the area back then, but he wasn't rooted either. Seasonal work. Long gaps in employment. A knack for disappearing without a trace and reappearing somewhere else with a new address and a different story. He knew the roads. He had reason to be out late. He had a temper, according to one ex, and a charm that made it easy to dismiss until it wasn't. He owned a dark pickup around the time of the disappearance, sold it months later, paperwork incomplete, The VIN traced through a maze of used car lots and handwritten bills of sale. The arrest didn't come from a confession. It came from accumulation. A partial fingerprint from the driver's door that once meant nothing now aligns with a record entered years after the fact. A fiber from the passenger seat matches a jacket he was photographed wearing in an old mugshot. The same color, the same weave, mass-produced but rare enough to raise eyebrows. Phone records don't place him at the scene, but they place him close enough, quiet where he should have been loud. He can explain each piece in isolation. Together, they form a pressure that bends explanations until they creak. The defense smells blood in the water. They file motions with surgical precision, challenging the science, the custody, the memory of witnesses whose lives have moved on. They bring in experts who talk about secondary transfer, about coincidence, about the danger of narrative creep in cold cases, the human tendency to connect dots even when the picture is incomplete. In depositions, old detectives bristle at suggestions of tunnel vision. New detectives insist this is fresh eyes, not hindsight. The judge listens, pen poised, the room held in a tension that crackles like dry air before a storm. Outside, the town fractures along familiar lines. Yard signs appear, not for candidates but for beliefs. Justice for her. Due process matters. At the grocery store, conversations drop when certain people walk by. The family is caught in the middle, grateful for momentum, terrified of disappointment. They revisit the night in their minds, replaying the last phone call, the last joke, the last ordinary moment that now feels charged with meaning. They answer reporters' questions with care, aware that every word becomes evidence in the court of public opinion. Then something shifts. A witness from the early days, someone who once swore they saw nothing, reaches out through a lawyer. The story has changed over the years, refined, softened, hardened depending on the audience, but now there's a new detail: a truck parked at an angle, a man pacing, a sound like metal on metal. The timing doesn't quite line up with the established timeline, but timelines are elastic things. The detective listens, records, asks the same questions 3 different ways. The witness falters, then steadies. The detail feels real. It also feels late. In a storage room, a box yields a surprise. A tape mislabeled. A cassette from an interview conducted days after the disappearance, never transcribed, never revisited. The audio crackles to life, voices younger, sharper, less guarded. In it, a different witness mentions a nickname, a throwaway line about someone known for giving rides late at night, someone who liked to talk, liked to be seen as helpful. The nickname matches the suspects, a coincidence that might mean everything or nothing. The detective closes his eyes and listens again, marking the cadence, the pauses, the way the name is dropped and then abandoned, as if the speaker didn't want to linger. The suspect remains silent. In his cell, he reads articles with his name in bold and shakes his head at the ones that get it wrong. He files grievances about the food, about the lights, about the noise. He makes a single phone call to a relative who doesn't ask questions and doesn't offer comfort. His lawyer tells him patience is a strategy. Silence is a shield. The state has to prove its story. He doesn't have to give them a better one. As hearings drag on, the edges fray. An evidence technician admits a lapse in documentation from years ago. A signature missing, a date unclear. It's minor, procedural, but the defense seizes it like a lifeline. A DNA result comes back inconclusive, neither confirming nor excluding. The media swings between triumph and doubt, headlines hedging with qualifiers. Cold case cracked, maybe. Arrest shocks family, but questions remain. The language shifts, careful now, less declarative. The detective feels the weight of time pressing in. Cold cases are fragile things. They thaw and refreeze. They invite hope and punish it. He returns to the road again, this time at dawn, the same hour the call came in years before. He watches the light change, the way the land reveals itself reluctantly. He thinks about the open door, the keys left behind, the choice implied. He thinks about the suspect, the evidence, the way stories congeal around need. He knows that truth, if it exists here, will not announce itself. It will have to be cornered, coaxed, earned. In the courtroom, a motion is argued that could change everything. Suppress the fingerprint. Exclude the fiber. Without them, the case becomes a scaffold without beams. The judge takes it under advisement. Days pass. The town waits again, the old muscle memory kicking in. Waiting is something they know how to do. Waiting has shaped them. At night, the victim's mother dreams of headlights in the distance, of a door swinging open and closed, a metronome marking time. She wakes with the sound of gravel in her ears and the taste of dust in her mouth. Closure is a word people use when they don't know what else to offer. What she wants is an ending that fits the beginning, a truth that doesn't require imagination to complete it. The case inches forward, then stalls. A ruling comes down, mixed, a win and a loss for both sides, enough to keep the story alive, not enough to settle it. The arrest stands. The doubts stand with it. The phrase cold case refuses to let go, clinging to every update like a reminder that temperature is not destiny. Somewhere between the open road and the closed courtroom, between evidence and memory, the truth waits, patient and exacting, and the town listens again, for the sound that will finally tell them what happened before dawn, when a car was left running and the night took someone it hasn't given back. The courtroom air feels recycled thin, carrying the faint smell of old wood and coffee that's gone cold. On the docket, the case is just a number, but numbers don't explain why every seat is filled, why reporters lean forward as if proximity might sharpen the truth. When the judge takes the bench, the room stills, and for a moment it seems possible that a single sentence could tilt the balance, could turn years of waiting into something solid. The ruling lands carefully, syllable by syllable, allowing some evidence, excluding others, a compromise that satisfies no one and fuels everyone. The fingerprint stays. The fiber goes. The narrative holds, but it limps. Outside, microphones bloom like metal flowers. Soundbites replace nuance. The headline writers reach again for certainty and come up with tension instead. Cold case moves toward trial. Defense challenges weakened state's case. The family watches from the courthouse steps, hands linked, faces set in practiced neutrality, knowing that anything they show will be interpreted, amplified, turned into a symbol they never asked to be. Somewhere in the crowd a voice shouts a question that cuts too close, and a deputy steps in, gentle but firm, creating space where there is none. Preparation becomes a war of inches. The prosecution rehearses timelines until they feel inevitable, arranges photographs to guide the eye, chooses words that make absence feel heavy. They lean on the open door, the keys, the dropped call, the partial print that ties the suspect to the vehicle in a way no one else can explain away. They talk about opportunity and motive, about the psychology of control, about how some crimes leave little mess because the mess is the point. The defense counters with doubt sharpened to a blade, slicing at assumptions, reminding the jury pool that memory degrades, evidence ages, and coincidence is not guilt. They bring in charts, studies, experts who speak calmly about error rates and bias, about how cold cases can grow stories in the gaps where facts once were. Jury selection stretches on, each question a probe, each answer a glimpse into how 12 strangers might carry a stranger's fate. People admit to following the news, to forming opinions they swear they can set aside. Others claim ignorance that strains belief. A woman is dismissed because she lost a sister years ago, and says she still waits for answers. A man is excused because he says he trusts the police too much. The process grinds forward, impartiality an ideal approximated by attrition. In the evenings, the detective returns to the file, even as lawyers tell him his work is done. He reads transcripts, listens to tapes, searches for a thread that might tighten at the right moment. He notices a detail he's seen 100 times but never felt. The timing of a receipt, the location of a cell tower, the way a witness described the truck's exhaust. He sketches the route again, this time overlaying traffic patterns from a different year, imagining how the road sounded then, how a decision could be hidden by noise. He wonders if the case is strong because it's true or because it's been believed long enough to feel true. The suspect watches the trial prep from the other side of glass, his days measured by count times and meal trays. He writes letters that say little, drafts unsent explanations, circles dates on a calendar that means nothing in a place where time pools instead of flows. He studies the faces of guards, of other inmates, learning which eyes look away and which linger. When his lawyer visits, they speak in hypotheticals. If this happens, if that's allowed, if the jury believes. Silence remains his posture, not because he has nothing to say, but because saying the wrong thing feels worse than saying nothing at all. As the trial opens, the town leans in. Opening statements sketch two worlds using the same facts. In one, a predator exploited a moment, a place, a vulnerability, and got away with it for years until technology and persistence closed the net. In the other, an imperfect system latched onto a convenient suspect and built a case out of fragments, mistaking momentum for truth. Jurors watch, pens poised, faces blank, absorbing a story that asks them to become historians of a night they never lived. Witnesses take the stand, voices trembling or steady, memories resurfacing like artifacts pulled from silt. The gas station clerk points, hesitates, points again. The mechanic describes the truck, admits he can't be sure. The early witness with the late-breaking detail tells the story one more time, the metal-on-metal sound hanging in the air like a dropped tool. Cross-examination peels back confidence, exposing uncertainty, the human need to fill silence with sense. Experts argue over the fingerprint, over how partial is partial, over what constitutes a match. The jury watches slides of whirls and loops, tries to see certainty in patterns that look, to the untrained eye, like art. The family sits through it all, learning details they never wanted, seeing their loved ones' final hours reconstructed by strangers. They flinch at mispronunciations, at dates off by a day, at jokes whispered too loudly during breaks. They cling to the moments that feel like progress, to the way the prosecution says her name clearly, fully, as if naming can summon presence. They endure the defense's implication that the truth is unknowable, that closure is a myth, that sometimes nothing happens for a reason. Midway through the trial, a surprise. The defense calls a witness no one expected, a former co-worker of the suspect who places him somewhere else that night, a bar 2 towns over, a birthday celebration remembered because of a cake shaped like a guitar. The memory is vivid, sensory, convincing. The prosecution attacks the timeline, points out the distance, the lack of corroboration. The witness holds, then cracks on a small detail, a song that didn't exist yet, a brand of beer not sold there at the time. Doubt flickers, but it doesn't vanish. It rarely does. Closing arguments press hard. The prosecution asks the jury to trust the accumulation, to see the shape that emerges when fragments align. The defense asks them to honor the standard, to resist the urge to complete a story because it's been waiting so long. Reasonable doubt is not a technicality, they say. It's the point. The judge instructs. The jury retires. The room exhales. Deliberations stretch into days. Notes go back and forth. Requests for transcripts, for photographs, for clarification on legal language. Rumors leak through courthouse corridors, unverified and contagious. Someone says the jury is split. Someone says there's a holdout. Someone says they asked about the open door again, about why keys would be left behind. The detective waits, the family waits, the suspect waits, each with a different fear. When the verdict finally comes, it arrives like a weather change, abrupt and irreversible. The jury files in, faces pale. The foreperson stands, voice steady despite the tremor underneath, and reads words that land unevenly, satisfying no script. Guilty on one count, not guilty on another. Hung on the rest. A fractured decision for a fractured case. Gasps ripple. The judge thanks the jury, sets dates, explains next steps that sound procedural and endless. Afterward, there is no catharsis. The family holds each other, unsure whether to grieve or brace. The suspect is led away, expression unreadable, a man both condemned and unresolved. The headlines struggle again. Partial justice. Lingering doubts. Cold case remains complicated. The town feels the familiar ache of almost. That night, County Road 417 lies empty under a sky thick with stars. A truck passes, then another, headlights slicing the dark. Somewhere between guilt and innocence, between proof and possibility, the truth keeps its distance, and the echo of an open door swings on, marking time, refusing to settle. The sentence doesn't close the book. It cracks the spine and leaves pages fluttering. Guilty on one count gives the state something to hold up, something heavy enough to say justice has weight, but the hung charges echo louder, unanswered, a hollow space where certainty was supposed to live. The judge's gavel falls and rises again, procedural, restrained, and the courtroom empties in slow motion, people moving as if wading through water. Outside, the cameras catch reactions out of context, a tear here, a clenched jaw there, and stitch them into a narrative that fits the broadcast window but not the truth of the moment. In the days that follow, the town recalibrates. Some feel relief, the kind that settles into the bones and allows sleep to return in short, cautious stretches. Others feel cheated, as if the verdict took something from them without giving enough back. The family fields condolences that sound like congratulations and congratulations that sound like condolences, nodding through both, unsure which applies. They visit the place where flowers once wilted and stand by the road again, the wind the same as it ever was, the gravel unchanged. Closure, they learn, is not a switch but a negotiation, and this one has barely begun. The defense files notices with clinical speed. Appeals are promised, errors alleged, arguments sharpened for a higher court where distance might cool the heat of the moment. The suspect is transferred, chains clinking softly, a man now defined by a conviction that doesn't answer the biggest question. In interviews, his lawyer speaks of vindication delayed, of truth obscured by time, of a system that mistook endurance for accuracy. The prosecutor counters with resolve, with faith in the process, with the belief that fragments, when assembled carefully, can reflect reality even after years of distortion. Evidence returns to boxes, labeled with new stickers, dates updated, outcomes noted. The fiber excluded at trial becomes a footnote. The fingerprint admitted becomes a pillar. The tape from the mislabeled cassette sits in a separate sleeve now, its importance elevated by attention. The detective feels the strange letdown that comes after a case stops being fluid, when momentum hardens into record. He knows that appeals will resurrect arguments, that new eyes will scrutinize his steps, that the case will never truly rest. He also knows that some doors, once opened, refuse to close neatly. A month later, a letter arrives from an unlikely place. An inmate at a facility 2 states away writes in blocky handwriting, mentions a rumor from years ago, a man bragging too much, a night drive, a woman who wouldn't stop asking questions. The details are thin, secondhand, unreliable by design, but one line catches the detective's attention, a reference to a location not previously discussed, a culvert off a service road where sound disappears. He reads the letter twice, then a third time, and feels the familiar pull, the gravity of maybe. The prosecutor is skeptical. Jailhouse letters are a genre unto themselves, currency traded for favors that may never materialize. Still, the location is checked. Deputies walk the service road with flashlights and cameras, documenting trash and animal bones and the quiet way the land absorbs secrets. They find nothing that day. They file a report anyway. The case has taught them that absence doesn't mean insignificance. Public interest surges and wanes in cycles. A podcast picks up the story, re-examines the trial, interviews former classmates and distant relatives, plays the old tape with dramatic pauses. New listeners arrive with fresh opinions, confident and loud. Old residents roll their eyes and turn the volume down. The phrase cold case re-enters the conversation, attached now to debates about what it means to solve something that still bleeds uncertainty. The victim's name trends for a week, then sinks again, carried forward only by those who can't let it go. At sentencing, the courtroom fills once more. Impact statements crackle with pain and restraint, words chosen carefully because they will live forever in transcripts. The family speaks of birthdays missed, of a chair that remains empty, of a road that still tightens their chests when they drive it at night. The defense asks for mercy, for acknowledgement of doubt, for a sentence that reflects ambiguity. The judge listens, weighs, decides. The number of years pronounced sounds solid until you try to imagine living them. Afterward, the suspect finally speaks, not a confession, not a denial, but a statement about being misunderstood, about time's cruelty, about a system that took pieces of a life and rearranged them into something unrecognizable. Some hear defiance. Some hear resignation. Most hear noise layered over silence. He is led away again, and the room empties faster this time, as if people have learned that staying doesn't change the ending. Months pass. Appeals crawl forward. Motions are argued in quieter rooms with fewer cameras. A judge grants a hearing on a narrow issue, denies another without comment. The case becomes something lawyers visit between others, a familiar weight they know how to carry. The detective moves on, new files stacking up, but this one never leaves his peripheral vision. He drives County Road 417 less often now, but when he does, he slows without meaning to, eyes scanning ditches and fence lines out of habit. Then a development no one predicted. Advances in forensic genealogy make headlines elsewhere, cases older and colder cracking open with startling clarity. The family wonders aloud if this could help them too, if the partials and fragments left behind might speak a different language now. The prosecutor is cautious but curious. The defense is wary, protective of finality. The evidence custodian checks inventory, notes what remains viable. The conversation begins, tentative, hopeful, dangerous. A sample is sent. Weeks stretch. The waiting muscle tightens again, familiar and cruel. When results return, they complicate more than they clarify. A distant familial connection surfaces, not to the suspect, but to someone tangential, a name that appeared once in an early report and then faded. The connection is weak, statistical, but enough to reopen questions that everyone thought had been addressed. The defense seizes on it. The prosecution hedges. The family feels the ground shift under their feet. Is this a crack in the case or a crack in the confidence that held it together? No one can say. Experts argue. Probabilities are charted. The story resists a clean rewrite. The suspect remains where he is, his status unchanged, but the certainty around him thins, like ice warming under a cautious sun. The phrase wrongful conviction enters the comments sections, whispered at first, then louder. Through it all, the road remains. The place where the car was found is now marked by nothing at all, the tape long gone, the gravel rearranged by years of tires. If you didn't know, you wouldn't notice. That's how places keep secrets, by looking ordinary. At night, when the wind moves just right, it carries sound in strange ways, engines echoing farther than they should, doors slamming that might be miles away. The case is no longer just about what happened that night. It's about what happens to truth when time gets involved, when stories are told and retold, when evidence is handled by human hands. It's about whether justice is a destination or a direction, whether answers are discovered or constructed. The town lives with these questions now, folded into daily routines, into the way they lock doors and glance at mirrors. Cold cases, they've learned, don't end. They transform. They shed skins and grow new ones, adapting to the era that examines them. This one has moved from shock to scrutiny, from silence to argument, from absence to a presence that refuses to behave. Somewhere between a conviction that doesn't satisfy and a doubt that won't settle, the truth waits again, patient as ever, listening for the moment when someone finally speaks without flinching, and the echo of that open door can at last come to rest. The appeal breathes new air into old arguments, and the case wakes up again like a body refusing to stay down. In a higher court, far from the cameras that once crowded the steps, judges read transcripts instead of faces, weigh words instead of emotions. The defense drills into the fingerprint, into the methodology that let a partial become persuasive, into the years between collection and comparison when standards shifted quietly, almost politely. The prosecution answers with precedent and persistence, with the idea that progress doesn't invalidate the past, it illuminates it. The law moves slower here, deliberate, insulated, but the stakes feel sharper because distance strips away spectacle and leaves only consequence. The town hears about the appeal the way it hears about weather in another county, abstract until it isn't. A local paper runs a small headline below the fold. A radio host frames it as a test of the system. Social media fills the gaps with certainty masquerading as insight. The family learns the language of appeals by necessity, learns what remand means, what harmless error suggests, learns how to sit with uncertainty without letting it hollow them out completely. They've become experts in a field they never wanted to study. Meanwhile, the genealogical lead refuses to die quietly. The name at surface belongs to a man long deceased, a drifter whose life left shallow records and deeper rumors. He passed through the area around the time of the disappearance, worked short stints, vanished again. He owned a truck once, dark, old, sold for scrap. The connection is thin but sticky, the kind that pulls at the edges of a story until it frays. Investigators chase what they can, track down relatives who remember little and want less, sift through photographs where faces blur into decades. No confession waits at the end of this road, no diary, no box under a bed. Just the sense that the past still has rooms no one's entered. The suspect hears about the genealogical angle from a guard who shouldn't have said anything. It lands like a pebble dropped into still water, ripples spreading outward. He tells his lawyer. The lawyer smiles, careful not to promise, careful not to poison the well with hope. In filings, the defense reframes the case as a cautionary tale, a rush to judgment complicated by evolving science. They ask for relief. They ask for time. They ask the court to consider that certainty built on partials may not be certainty at all. On County Road 417, nothing marks the years except the way the gravel compacts and loosens in cycles. A new fence line appears where an old one sagged. A culvert is cleared after a flood. The land absorbs change without comment. The detective, now supervising others, drives the road again when the genealogical lead comes up empty. When the appeal stalls, when the case feels like it's slipping into a familiar purgatory. He parks where the car once stood and lets the engine idle, listening. He's learned that silence can be instructive, that sometimes the absence of sound tells you where noise once mattered. A documentary crew calls, then calls again. The family declines, then reconsiders, then declines once more. Exposure feels like theft dressed as help. Still, the story leaks out through others, through reenactments and ominous music, through interviews spliced to suggest conclusions no one has earned. The suspect's face becomes a thumbnail, frozen in a moment chosen by an algorithm. The victim's smile is looped until it feels like a mask. Truth flattens under repetition. The appellate court issues an opinion that threads the needle. The conviction stands. A narrow error is acknowledged but deemed harmless. The door remains open for future challenges should new evidence rise above speculation. It's a decision that satisfies procedure and frustrates everyone else. The family feels relief etched with exhaustion. The defense vows to continue. The prosecution claims validation without celebration. The town shrugs and moves on mostly. Then a call comes in late one night, the kind that makes sleep impossible. A hiker, miles from the original scene, stumbled onto something half-buried after a storm shifted the earth. Bones. Old. Weathered. Found near a service road no one remembers being mentioned before. Deputies respond. Tape goes up again, yellow against green. A visual echo that tightens chests across the county. Forensic teams work carefully, reverently, cataloging what remains, knowing how fragile hope can be when it's attached to a bag of fragments. The news breaks fast. Possible remains linked to cold case. The family holds their breath. The suspect's lawyer files a motion within hours, asking for access, for testing, for restraint in public statements. The prosecutor urges patience. Science, they say, takes time. The land has been holding this for years. It won't give it up easily. Results come back in stages, each one a partial truth. The remains are human. Female. Age range consistent. The DNA is degraded but not silent. Comparison is run. The waiting becomes physical, a pressure behind the eyes, a tightness in the chest. When confirmation finally arrives, it's delivered quietly, without ceremony. It's her. The words feel unreal, heavy, necessary. The family weeps and thanks and collapses inward all at once, grief renewed and reshaped by certainty. The road has given back what it took, too late to change anything, just in time to hurt again. With the remains come questions sharpened by location. The service road. The culvert mentioned in a letter. The distance from where the car was found. Timelines shift. Possibilities expand and contract. The defense seizes the moment, arguing that the location undermines the state's theory, that it aligns more closely with the genealogical drifter than with their client. The prosecution counters that movement after the fact explains distance, that opportunism wears many faces. Experts disagree. Maps are redrawn. A second autopsy reveals trauma that doesn't speak clearly. Marks softened by years underground. Cause of death is narrowed but not named. The ambiguity feeds the argument machine. The family wants answers that bones can't provide. The detective feels the old pull again. The sense that truth is near but angled, requiring a shift in perspective he can't quite find. Public opinion swings hard. Wrongful conviction narratives surge. Others double down on guilt, citing the verdict, the fingerprint, the accumulation. The phrase cold case takes on new life, now meaning not just old but unstable, unsettled. The suspect sits in his cell and listens to the radio, hearing his name paired with doubt and certainty in equal measure. He says nothing, but his silence now reads differently, less shield, more provocation. A judge orders additional testing, limited, cautious. The genealogical lead is revisited with the new location in mind. Old maps surface. A photograph from years ago shows a truck near the service road, indistinct, possibly nothing, possibly everything. The detective pins it to a board and stares, aware that boards can lie as easily as they can reveal. The burial brings the town together in a way the trial never did. There is no argument at the graveside, only the shared weight of a life interrupted. The road hums in the distance, traffic indifferent. The family speaks of love, not evidence. For a moment the case loosens its grip, allows grief to be grief. But cold cases don't release so easily. As earth settles over the grave, the questions rise again. Sharper now that one absence has been filled. Who left her there? Why that place? Why the open door? Why the keys? The conviction stands, the doubts stand taller, and the truth, newly complicated by bones and distance and time, waits again in the narrow space between what can be proven and what can be known, listening for the next storm to shift the ground. The ground gives up answers reluctantly, and even when it does, it never explains itself. After the burial, the town exhales in a way that feels almost guilty, as if relief is a betrayal of the years spent searching. The service road becomes a point on everyone's private map, a place glanced at when driving past, a location whispered about in kitchens and commented on in forums by people who have never set foot there. It doesn't look like a dumping ground. That's what unsettles investigators the most. It looks chosen. With the remains identified, the case splits into parallel tracks that don't quite intersect. On one, the conviction stands, bolstered by the trial record, the fingerprint, the jury's fractured certainty. On the other, the discovery rewrites geography, nudges timelines, invites new narratives to step forward. The prosecution insists the tracks will converge if given time. The defense argues they never should have been laid that way in the first place. Forensic reports arrive in pieces, technical language wrapping grief in numbers and margins of error. Soil composition suggests the body was placed there shortly after the disappearance, not moved years later as some speculated. Insect activity narrows the window but won't commit to a date. Trauma marks refuse to resolve into a single cause, leaving experts to speak in ranges and probabilities. Each ambiguity becomes ammunition. Each certainty, however small, becomes a banner. The genealogical angle surges again, fueled by location. Analysts rerun models, widen parameters, follow branches that once seemed too distant to matter. The deceased drifter's family tree yields a cousin with a history of violence, a man who lived nearby briefly, whose name appears in a traffic stop log months after the disappearance. The stop was routine. The note was brief. The truck was dark. It always comes back to trucks. Investigators knock on doors that open reluctantly, ask questions that draw out shrugs and tired eyes. Time has thinned memories to outlines. The suspect's legal team files a motion for a new trial, citing newly discovered evidence and the shifting theory of the crime. Their brief is meticulous, footnotes stacked like bricks, arguments framed not as declarations but as invitations to doubt. They emphasize the service road, the culvert, the letter from the inmate that mentioned it before anyone else did. Coincidence, they suggest, should make a careful court uncomfortable. The prosecution responds with equal care, arguing that coincidences cluster in hindsight, that the letter's author could have guessed, that the core of the case remains intact. The judge schedules a hearing. The date lands like a marker driven into uncertain ground. Reporters dust off notes. Podcasts announce updates. The family braces for another public excavation of private pain. They sit at their kitchen table and read the filings together, learning how their daughter's last night has become a chessboard, squares labeled and relabeled, moves debated by people who never knew her laugh. At the hearing, experts testify again, older now, more cautious. One admits that standards have evolved, that what was persuasive then might be framed differently now. Another insists that evolution doesn't negate reliability, it refines it. The inmate who wrote the letter appears via video, his face pixelated, his story consistent and slippery at the same time. He insists he heard details no one else knew. Cross-examination reveals inconsistencies that could be lies or the erosion of time. The courtroom listens, suspended between wanting this to matter and fearing that it might. The detective watches from the back, hands folded, feeling the strange dislocation of seeing his work argued as theory. He knows where the file bends, where assumptions hardened. He also knows what he saw on that road at dawn, the way absence felt intentional. He tells himself both can be true, that the human mind craves coherence and the world rarely provides it. Still, when the defense displays a map overlay showing the service road relative to the suspect's known movements, something tightens in his chest. Fits too neatly. Or maybe that's the danger. The judge takes the matter under advisement again, a phrase that has become a refrain. Weeks pass. The suspect waits. The family waits. The town waits in the way it has learned to, with half attention and a practiced shrug. Life goes on, but it carries the case like a low-grade fever. A decision comes down in late afternoon, when newsrooms are scrambling. The judge grants limited relief. An evidentiary hearing focused on the new location and the genealogical lead. No immediate new trial. It's a crack, not a break. The defense celebrates carefully. The prosecution signals confidence. The family feels the familiar whiplash, hope and dread colliding without canceling each other out. In preparation, investigators return to the service road with fresh eyes. They bring ground-penetrating radar, drones, specialists who speak the language of land. They search beyond where the remains were found, extending grids, noting disturbances that could be nothing or could be graves erased by weather. They find debris, old cans, a rusted tool, a tire rim. They document everything. The land offers no confession. A breakthrough threatens from an unexpected angle. A retired officer, watching coverage from his living room, recognizes the culvert mentioned in the inmate's letter as a place he once pulled someone over late at night, years ago. A dark truck idling, a man nervous but polite. He remembers because the stop felt off, because the man asked too many questions, because the night stuck. The officer calls it in, apologetic for the delay. Memory is a treacherous witness, but sometimes it's all that's left. Records confirm a stop near the service road within the window, logged under a different case, buried in paper. The driver's name is not the suspect's. It's the cousin's surfaced by genealogy. The truck is listed as dark. The destination unknown. The prosecution cautions against overinterpretation. The defense pounces. The narrative strains. The evidentiary hearing becomes a focal point, a chance to reconcile or rupture. Witnesses testify about the stop. Experts debate the weight of degraded DNA. Maps are unfurled again. The family listens as strangers argue over distances that feel obscene in their precision. The suspect watches, jaw set, eyes alert now in a way they haven't been before. Silence for the first time looks like strategy under pressure. When the hearing concludes, the judge's face reveals nothing. Another advisement. Another weight. The cold case, once thought cracked, now feels like it's splintering, each piece sharp and dangerous. The phrase reasonable doubt floats back into headlines, heavier than before, anchored to bones and roads and belated memories. In the meantime, the town's relationship with the road changes again. People slow when they pass the service turnoff. Someone leaves flowers there, unprompted, untended. A cross appears and disappears. The place resists becoming a shrine, but it absorbs attention like heat. Whatever the court decides next will not erase the years or tidy the story. It will add another layer, another interpretation, another reason for people to argue about what justice looks like when time has chewed at the edges. The truth, if it's here, is buried under procedures and probabilities, under grief and the need for endings. It waits in the narrow margin where evidence meets memory, where a dark truck idles in the imagination, and the road keeps its counsel, patient, indifferent, holding what it knows until someone asks the right question in the right way, or until time runs out and the asking stops. The waiting changes texture after the evidentiary hearing, thickening into something heavier than suspense, heavier than hope. It feels procedural now, bureaucratic, as if the truth has been reduced to filings and footnotes, and yet everyone knows the next decision could bend the story in a way nothing else has. The judge's chambers become a black box. Inside, arguments echo without witnesses, evidence breathes without context, and the law asks itself what it can bear to correct without unraveling what it has already declared. When the ruling finally comes, it arrives without drama, a PDF posted mid-morning, its language careful, restrained, devastating in its restraint. The court acknowledges the significance of the service road, the belated traffic stop, the genealogical thread that now runs like a fault line through the case. It does not overturn the conviction. It does not affirm it without question. It orders a new trial on limited grounds, vacating the count that held the sentence together while leaving the rest intact pending review. It is a legal half-step that feels to everyone involved like standing on a trapdoor. The suspect is brought back into court weeks later, thinner, grayer, eyes scanning faces as if looking for something familiar in a room that has learned to be hostile. The chains sound louder this time. The prosecutor's voice is steadier than before, less confident, more precise. The defense speaks with an edge sharpened by momentum. The family sits in the same place they always do, knowing now that certainty is not a direction this case plans to travel. Outside, the story detonates again. Wrongful conviction headlines run next to justice delayed ones. Commentators choose sides with enthusiasm, constructing arguments from fragments they half understand. The word cold case reappears, no longer a descriptor of age but of temperature, how warm belief is allowed to get before it burns away doubt. The town feels smaller under the attention, more exposed, as if the roads themselves are being watched. Preparation for the new trial feels different. The prosecution rebuilds, stripping the narrative down to what can survive attack. They focus on the night itself, on opportunity, on the open door and the fingerprint that still ties the suspect to the car. They soften claims about motive, avoid absolutes, frame their case as the most reasonable explanation rather than the only one. The defense widens the frame, places the service road at the center, elevates the traffic stop to a hinge on which the entire story turns. They argue that the first trial told a convenient story, not a complete one. New witnesses are added, old ones are reconsidered. The retired officer's memory is tested and retested, its reliability debated with charts and timelines. The cousin surfaced by genealogy becomes a shadow presence, not charged, not present but unavoidable. His past is examined carefully, because the law is wary of blaming the absent. Still, his proximity, his vehicle, his documented stop near the service road refuse to stay peripheral. Jury selection begins again, slower this time, more cautious. Prospective jurors admit to having opinions formed by years of coverage. Some confess distrust in the system. Others confess too much faith in it. The court pares them down, searching for neutrality in a landscape that has forgotten what that looks like. 12 are seated. Alternates wait. The machinery grinds forward. The second opening statement is quieter than the first, more dangerous for it. The prosecution speaks of responsibility, of the duty to weigh evidence without romance or fear. The defense speaks of humility, of the courage to say we got it wrong or at least we don't know. Jurors lean in, aware now that this is not a whodunit but a reckoning. The service road dominates the testimony. Photos from different seasons show how it disappears and reappears, how easy it would be to miss, how deliberately it could be chosen. Experts testify that placing a body there suggests familiarity, not chance. The defense agrees, then pivots, arguing that familiarity does not belong to the man on trial. They show maps of his movements, contrast them with the cousin's documented presence. They play the inmate's letter again, the mention of the culvert ringing louder now that bones have been pulled from nearby ground. Cross-examination sharpens everything. The prosecution presses the retired officer on memory decay, on how suggestion can shape recollection. The defense presses forensic experts on uncertainty, on how degraded DNA speaks softly and is often misunderstood. The fingerprint returns to center stage, enlarged, dissected, its authority challenged without being dismissed. Jurors stare, searching for clarity in ridges that refuse to resolve into certainty. The family endures the second telling with less visible reaction, as if emotion has learned to hide. They have buried their daughter now. The ground has weight. The idea that the wrong person could be punished sits alongside the fear that the right one might never be. Grief does not choose sides. Just wants an end. The suspect testifies this time. It is a gamble and everyone knows it. His voice is measured, his answers narrow, his story consistent with what he has always claimed. That he was near the area, that he knew the roads, that he touched the car earlier that week when he offered help, that he left town because work dried up, not because he was running. The prosecution presses him on inconsistencies, on silence, on timing. He holds. He does not confess. He does not explode. He looks for the first time less like a symbol and more like a man. When the cousin's name is spoken aloud in court, it changes the air. Not accused, not defended, just present. The judge instructs the jury carefully, warning against speculation, against filling gaps with convenience. The warning lands heavy because gaps are all this case has ever had. Closing arguments feel like a tightrope walk. The prosecution asks jurors to trust their judgment without demanding certainty. The defense asks them to honor doubt without celebrating it. Both acknowledge the body, the road, the years. Both ask for courage. The jury retires again, carrying a story that has learned to resist endings. Deliberations stretch. Notes ask about distances, about dates, about the traffic stop. They ask whether touching the car days earlier could explain the print. They ask whether familiarity with the service road can be inferred or must be proven. Each question feels like a pulse, a sign that the case is alive and unstable. When the verdict comes, it is quieter than the first, almost gentle. Not guilty. The words land and do not echo. There is no cheer, no gasp loud enough to mark the moment. The family stiffens, breath caught between disbelief and understanding. The suspect closes his eyes just for a second, then opens them again as if afraid the room might vanish. The judge thanks the jury. The state says it respects the verdict. The defense speaks of justice corrected. Cameras capture faces that refuse to fit a single emotion. Outside, the road hums as traffic passes, indifferent to the weight it carries in human minds. The case is over and the waystorms are over, leaving damage and clean air in unpredictable patterns. No one is charged for the death now. The cousin remains a question the law will not pursue without more. The conviction dissolves. The doubts remain. Cold cases, once reheated, don't return to their original state. They cool differently. They leave scars. This one ends not with an answer but with a clearing, a space where certainty once stood. The town must learn to live with that space, to drive past the service road without slowing too much, to speak the victim's name without attaching a verdict. Somewhere in the silence after acquittal, the truth still exists, whole and exact, unbothered by procedure. It knows who chose that road, who stopped that night, who left a door open and keys behind. It waits, as it always has, patient and unafraid, while the rest of the world decides whether not knowing is something it can survive. The acquittal doesn't quiet the noise. It rearranges it. Sound shifts from the courtroom to kitchens and truck cabs, to comment sections and late-night radio, to the small pauses people leave in sentences when they don't know what to say next. Legally, the case is finished. Culturally, it's radioactive. The words "not guilty" are precise, limited, and insufficient for a story that has outgrown its own boundaries. The suspect walks out under a sky that looks too open to trust. There is no triumph in his step, no release that fits the moment. Freedom arrives without instructions. Reporters ask what he'll do next, whether he feels vindicated, whether he's angry. He answers carefully, thanks his lawyer, says he wants to go home, a word that no longer has a fixed location. In the days that follow, he avoids the road, avoids the town, avoids mirrors that might ask questions he doesn't want to answer. Being cleared is not the same as being unmarked. The family retreats from the public eye, grief folding in on itself again. Different now that the grave has a name and the case has no defendant. They are asked how they feel about the acquittal as if feeling were a verdict. They say they respect the jury. They say they want the truth. They say nothing else because everything else feels like a trap. At night, the mother dreams differently now. No headlights. No open door. Just a road that keeps going longer than it should with no place to turn around. The district attorney's office closes the file with language that feels ceremonial. Charges dismissed. Investigation ongoing. No further comment. It's a posture learned through repetition. A way to honor loss without promising what can't be delivered. Privately, there are arguments. Some believe the case should have ended years ago. Others believe it ended too soon. Everyone agrees it will never be clean. The genealogical lead stalls, then fades, then resurfaces in whispers. The cousin's trail goes cold in the way only human lives can go cold, scattered across addresses and aliases and forgotten work sites. Without new evidence, the law has no appetite to chase ghosts. The retired officer's memory remains on record, neither disproven nor elevated. The inmate who wrote the letter sends another note, Shorter this time, angrier, accusing everyone of ignoring what's obvious. It is filed and forgotten. A year passes, then another. The service road becomes ordinary again, reclaimed by weeds and neglect. The flowers left there dry out and disappear. A roadside marker proposed by the family is delayed, debated, approved, then quietly installed without ceremony. Drivers slow for a week, then forget. The road does what roads do. It keeps moving people past the places where things ended. A new podcast revisits the case with fresh voices and old confidence. They interview experts who weren't there, analyze maps with digital precision, suggest theories that feel elegant and dangerous. The acquitted man is framed as a victim of the system. The cousin is framed as an obvious suspect. The detectives are framed as products of their time. The victim is framed as a mystery rather than a person. Listeners binge and argue and move on. The story feeds and empties itself again. The detective, now close to retirement, cleans out his office. He finds notes scribbled in the margins of reports, questions circled and underlined, ideas abandoned because there wasn't time or permission. He wonders if he missed something simple because he was trained to look for complexity, or if the truth was always complicated and refused to be simplified. He drives the road one last time, not as an investigator, just as a man with memory. He doesn't stop. In town, a new generation grows up knowing the case as lore. A cautionary tale told without names. Don't stop on back roads at night. Lock your doors. Trust your instincts. The specifics blur. The fear remains. It settles into habits, into the way people glance at their mirrors and check their phones for signal bars, into the unspoken agreement that some questions are better left untouched because touching them changes you. Occasionally, a tip comes in. A sighting remembered too late. A confession overheard and half forgotten. Each one is logged, assessed, set aside. The machinery still exists, but it runs on a different fuel now. Skepticism. Cold cases age not just in years but in credibility. The longer they live, the more they demand, the less they give back. The acquitted man rebuilds a life in pieces. New work. New address. Fewer explanations. Some people believe him completely. Others never will. He learns to live in that space, to accept that innocence in the eyes of the law does not guarantee peace in the eyes of strangers. He avoids interviews. He avoids the story. But stories have a way of finding people anyway. The family marks anniversaries quietly. They visit the grave. They speak her name aloud. They refuse to let her become a case study or a headline. For them, the mystery is not intellectual. It's personal, intimate, unfinished. They don't need theories. They need a moment that doesn't exist. Cold cases, when left unresolved, don't fade. They fossilize. They become part of the landscape, like a bend in the road that everyone navigates without thinking, aware only when something goes wrong. This one sits beneath the surface of a town that has learned how to function with a missing piece, how to hold grief without a container. Some nights, when the wind moves just right, sound carries along County Road 417 in strange ways. An engine echoes longer than it should. Gravel shifts when no one is there. It's easy to dismiss. Easier to believe the land is just doing what land does. But people remember. They always do. The truth has not surfaced. It has not been disproven or erased. It exists somewhere beyond reach, intact, indifferent to verdicts and deadlines. It does not care that a trial ended or that a file was closed. It waits in the dark space between what happened and what can be proven, between memory and record, between a door left open and a road that keeps going, asking nothing, offering nothing, holding everything it was given and giving nothing back. Time doesn't heal this case. It just dulls the sharpest edges until they cut differently. Years after the acquittal, the story survives in fragments, traded like contraband between those who remember and those who pretend they don't. It surfaces when someone new asks about the road, when a stranger notices the small roadside marker and wonders why it's there, when a late-night host mentions that Texas cold case, with a tone that suggests distance equals safety. The evidence room holds what's left, boxed and labeled, the physical residue of a life interrupted. A clerk inventories the contents as part of a routine audit and pauses over items that feel heavier than their weight. The keys, tagged and sealed, the phone, inert and silent, the fingerprint card, now annotated with caveats and cross-references. Each item has been argued into meaning and back out again. Now they sit in enforced neutrality, objects stripped of narrative, waiting for someone to believe they can still speak. A new detective, younger, trained in an era that treats old cases as puzzles rather than legacies, requests access. He reads without reverence, without the emotional investment that once fueled decisions. He sketches timelines on a tablet, overlays satellite imagery that didn't exist before, runs simulations that test assumptions without caring who made them. He notices small things. A gap in the traffic data that aligns with a weather event. A phone ping that could be interpreted differently given tower upgrades. He doesn't announce revelations. He files notes. The service road appears again, this time in historical land records that show a brief period of construction activity near the culvert around the time of the disappearance. Contractors rotated through, paperwork sloppy, names abbreviated. One subcontractor stands out for reasons that are hard to articulate. Proximity, opportunity, a criminal record unrelated but suggestive. The detective follows the thread quietly, aware of the fatigue that greets any revival. Cold cases punish enthusiasm. The family is contacted with care. There may be new information. There may not. They listen, ask measured questions, protect themselves from expectation. They have learned that hope must be rationed. They grant permission to proceed, not because they believe but because they cannot stop wanting. The acquitted man hears about renewed interest through rumor, not notice. It tightens something in him he thought had finally relaxed. He calls his lawyer, who reassures him without promising anything. Double jeopardy is a wall, solid and final, but walls have doors for public opinion. He wonders if he will ever be allowed to exist without an asterisk. He wonders if the truth, whatever it is, would even help him now. The cousin's name drifts back into conversation, less accusatory than before, more contextual. He is dead now, the window for answers closed by biology rather than law. His history is re-examined, his movements traced as best they can be traced. There are gaps. There are always gaps. The detective resists filling them with story. He documents and waits. An old storage unit, long delinquent, is auctioned off. Inside, among the debris of a transient life, are tools, clothes, a length of rope stiff with age. Nothing illegal. Nothing definitive. But a jacket catches the detective's eye, familiar in a way that raises hairs. The fiber analysis is inconclusive. Time has done its work. Another almost. Media interest flickers, ignited by the phrase new developments, and extinguished by the lack of spectacle. No arrests. No confessions. Just process. The story doesn't trend. It lingers. The town barely notices. It has learned to carry the weight without ceremony. The detective compiles his findings into a supplemental report that reads like a question mark. He submits it, knowing what will happen next. The review board will acknowledge receipt. They will note the limitations. They will thank him for his diligence. They will close it again, gently, firmly, with language that suggests openness while practicing restraint. At the grave, the family leaves fresh flowers. They speak aloud, not to the dead but to the air, to the idea that truth is not offended by being addressed. They do not ask for justice anymore. They ask for peace, a word that has softened with use. County Road 417 remains unchanged in ways that feel intentional. The asphalt patched, the shoulder widened slightly, the culvert reinforced. Progress without commentary. Drivers pass without knowing what they're passing. That's how most histories survive, invisible until someone stops and listens. The case enters a new phase, quieter, less ambitious. It becomes an open file in name only, a repository for future technology that hasn't arrived yet. It waits for a voice from the past that hasn't decided to speak, for a breakthrough that doesn't know it's won yet. Cold cases don't ask for belief. They ask for patience. They exist in the long view, beyond verdicts and headlines, beyond guilt and innocence as legal constructs. This one sits in that space, balanced between what is known and what is suspected, between what was said and what was never asked. Somewhere the truth is still complete. It hasn't eroded or changed its mind. It doesn't care who was tried or cleared. It remembers the weight of keys in a hand, the sound of gravel under tires, the decision that redirected a life into absence. It waits without urgency, confident that time belongs to it more than to anyone else, confident that even if it is never spoken aloud, it remains what it has always been: exact, unforgiving, and untouched by doubt. Silence becomes the loudest witness in the 10th year after the acquittal. It settles into the case like dust on a shelf, thin at first, then thick enough to write names in with a finger. The file still exists, still technically open, but it's open now only by habit or by people too new to know better. The language around it softens. No longer active investigation. No longer pending leads. Just status unchanged. The younger detective transfers to another unit. His supplemental report is cited once, briefly, in a training seminar about cold case methodology, stripped of context and emotion, reduced to bullet points. Patterns. Caution. Avoid narrative bias. The case becomes an example rather than a pursuit. He feels a pang he doesn't quite understand, then lets it go. You can't carry every unanswered question forever. The job teaches you that, whether you want it to or not. Technology keeps moving without waiting for permission. Algorithms grow sharper. Databases widen. Somewhere, a lab advertises a breakthrough that promises to hear what degraded samples once whispered. The evidence custodian reads the memo, considers the costs, the approvals required, the odds. She flags the file for review and then, weeks later, unflags it when priorities shift. The future is always almost relevant. The acquitted man builds routines that feel like scaffolding. Wake early. Work steady. Keep answers short. He avoids Texas when he can, avoids the roads that curve like memory. Sometimes, late at night, he imagines stopping the car and standing by the shoulder, testing whether the land would accuse him if he listened long enough. He never does. He knows better than to ask questions he can't control. He marries quietly. He moves again. His name stops appearing in search results after the first few pages. That feels like a victory until he realizes how fragile it is. He knows that if the case stirs, his name will rise like sediment, clouding everything. Innocence is not a shield against curiosity. It's just a word that loses volume over time. The family ages into a different relationship with grief. It becomes less explosive, more architectural, a structure that holds days together. They volunteer. They mentor. They attend memorials for other families, offering a presence they once needed and now can provide. When asked about their case, they speak carefully, refusing to let bitterness define the memory of their daughter. They talk about who she was, not how she died. This is an act of resistance. Once a year, on a date that only they track, they drive County Road 417 at dusk. They do not stop. They do not look for signs. They let the road pass beneath them and feel the ordinary movement of wheels in time. It is their way of asserting that life continues even when answers don't. A journalist reaches out with a pitch framed as sensitivity, a retrospective, new angles. The family declines. The journalist writes it anyway, sourcing archives and experts, careful not to accuse, careful not to absolve. The piece runs and disappears into the stream. It changes nothing. That too is a lesson. In the evidence room, the keys remain. Metal doesn't forget. The phone remains powered down, its cracked screen reflecting fluorescent light. The fingerprint card remains annotated, its authority permanently conditional. Objects do not resolve cases. People do. And people get tired. A rumor surfaces briefly on a forum. An anonymous post claiming knowledge, claiming guilt, claiming regret. It is dissected, amplified, dismissed. The IP address leads nowhere useful. The words feel rehearsed. Another almost. Another reminder that certainty is addictive and unreliable. The service road is repaved. The culvert reinforced again. A sign goes up warning about flooding. No mention of history. Infrastructure has its own priorities. The land accommodates them without complaint. In a classroom miles away, a professor discusses the philosophy of justice, uses the case as an illustration of legal finality versus moral truth. Students argue passionately, confident in abstractions. They don't know the road. They don't know the weight of keys left behind. They will learn eventually that some questions resist frameworks. The detective who first drove the road at dawn retires fully now. On his last day, he takes the file home, not officially, not to keep, just to read once more in the quiet of his living room. He notes how young everyone sounds in the early interviews, how certain. He notes where he would ask different questions now, knowing what he knows. He returns the file the next morning unchanged. Regret is not an evidentiary category. Cold cases stretch time in strange ways. They compress decades into moments of attention, and then expand moments into decades of quiet. This one has done both. It has been loud enough to fracture a town and quiet enough to survive neglect. Somewhere, beyond files and verdicts and narratives, the truth remains indifferent to its own obscurity. It does not need witnesses. It does not require belief. It is not offended by doubt. It exists as it always has, anchored to a sequence of actions on a night that no longer belongs to anyone but memory. If it ever surfaces, it will not feel cinematic. It will feel small and precise and devastating in its simplicity. If it never does, the world will continue anyway, carrying the absence like a familiar weight, adjusting posture, building strength around it. County Road 417 will still be there. Asphalt warming in the sun, cooling at night, vehicles passing without pause. The open door exists now only in photographs and in the minds of those who remember why it mattered. The keys are still in evidence. The question is still open. Cold cases do not ask to be solved. They ask to be endured. And this one, shaped by time and trial and the stubborn refusal of certainty, endures, quietly, relentlessly, waiting not for justice, but for the moment when someone somewhere speaks without needing to be believed. In the end, the case doesn't conclude. Thins out. It disperses into people and places until it's no longer something you can point to. Only something you feel when the light is wrong or the road is too empty. Years pass without punctuation. The file remains where it has always been, neither alive nor dead. A quiet wait in a system designed to move on. The town changes names on storefronts and faces at school drop-offs. New families arrive with no memory of why an older neighbor still slows near County Road 417. Why conversations dip when someone mentions back roads at night. The story survives in tone rather than detail, in a shared instinct that some places require respect. You don't stop there unless you have to. You don't linger. You keep moving. The acquitted man grows older in ordinary ways. His hair thins. His hands stiffen in the mornings. The case becomes something people whisper about him rather than to him. A shadow that follows at a polite distance. He learns to live with that shadow, to acknowledge it without feeding it. On certain nights when sleep won't come, he replays the questions he was asked and the ones he never was. He wonders if truth, once delayed long enough, becomes indistinguishable from rumor. He wonders if innocence is something you feel or something you survive. The family's grief settles into ritual. Birthdays are marked with stories instead of tears. Holidays are quieter but no longer hollow. They stop expecting answers and start expecting memories, which arrive unannounced and welcome. They talk about her freely now, about her stubbornness, her humor, the way she sang along to songs slightly off-key. The case fades behind the person, and that feels like a victory no court could deliver. Once in a while, the phone rings with a voice that says there may be something new. A tip, a theory, a development. They listen, thank the caller, and hang up with measured breath. They no longer build futures on maybes. They've learned how fragile hope can be when stretched too thin. County Road 417 ages gracefully. The asphalt cracks and is repaired. The shoulder widens. The land does what land has always done, absorbing heat and rain and sound. If you stand there long enough, you can convince yourself nothing ever happened, that roads are just roads and nights are just nights. But memory doesn't require markers. It only needs witnesses, and places remember differently than people do. Somewhere, in a different town, a different life, someone carries a memory that doesn't fade. It surfaces in fragments, in the smell of dust, in the sound of gravel, in the weight of keys left where they shouldn't have been. That memory has no audience and no deadline. It exists without asking permission. It does not argue. Simply is. Cold cases don't end with revelations most of the time. They end with endurance. With people learning how to live alongside unanswered questions without letting them hollow everything else out. They end when attention moves on, not because the truth has changed, but because the world insists on forward motion. If the truth ever comes, it will arrive quietly. No sirens. No headlines sharp enough to cut through decades of distance. Just a sentence spoken in the right place, a fact revealed without drama. A final alignment of what happened with what is known. And if it never comes, the case will still have shaped lives, redirected paths, taught a town how to hold absence without collapsing under it. The open door is no longer a mystery. It's a symbol now, detached from mechanics and motive, representing the moment when ordinary life tilted into something irreversible. The keys, still sealed in plastic, still rest where they always have, proof that sometimes the smallest details carry the heaviest silence. Texas nights remain wide and dark. Roads stretch longer than they should. Engines hum and fade. Somewhere between the sound of tires and the quiet that follows, the truth remains exactly where it has always been. Complete, unconflicted, uninterested in resolution. And the cold case, no longer cracked, no longer burning with attention, settles back into the temperature it prefers. Not frozen, not solved, just present. A reminder that some stories don't belong to endings, only to time, and time, patient and unafraid, will keep them exactly as they are until the last person who remembers decides to stop listening. The story doesn't know it's supposed to stop. Even after memory thins and records yellow, even after the last reporter packs away notes and the last investigator retires, it keeps breathing in small, almost imperceptible ways. Part of it lives in language now, in how people say things without meaning to, how they hesitate before words like missing or found. Another part lives in the land, folded into contours that don't announce their significance. Years later, a storm rolls through Texas with the kind of violence that redraws maps. Rain pounds for days, creeks swell past their banks, service roads disappear under brown water that smells of iron and rot. When it finally recedes, it leaves behind debris and exposure, earth stripped down to layers that haven't seen light since before the case had a name. County crews move in to assess damage, clipboards in hand, thinking about budgets and repairs, not history. One of them notices something off near the culvert. Not bones this time. Not evidence in the way people expect. Just a patch of disturbed ground further down than anyone remembers searching. A place where erosion has peeled back soil unevenly, revealing the outline of something once heavy, once pressed into the earth. He flags it because that's his job. He doesn't know why his hands shake when he does. The call doesn't make the news. Not at first. It goes through channels that have learned to be cautious, to avoid igniting attention they can't sustain. Investigators arrive quietly, older and newer ones side by side, aware of the gravity but wary of expectations. They photograph, measure, dig carefully. They find artifacts that don't photograph well. Scraps. Rusted fragments. A buckle. A piece of plastic warped by time and pressure. Nothing definitive. Everything suggestive. The evidence is cataloged and sent away. Labs run tests with technologies that didn't exist when the case first broke, methods that promise clarity but still speak in probabilities. Results come back uneven. Some items can't be placed in time. Others can loosely. One fragment carries trace material that doesn't match the acquitted man. It also doesn't conclusively match anyone else. The margins of error loom large. The truth hovers just beyond resolution. Familiar and infuriating. The family is notified again, gently, with the practiced cadence of people who know how fragile this moment is. They listen, ask the same questions they've learned to ask, avoid the ones that hurt too much. They drive the road one more time, slower now, aware that every return makes this place feel less like geography and more like a chapter that refuses to close. They don't cry. They don't expect anything. They just stand and let the wind move past them. The acquitted man hears about the new dig through an old acquaintance who still watches the news out of habit. It unsettles him in a way he thought he'd outgrown. He doesn't call his lawyer this time. He doesn't post statements or brace for cameras. He waits. He has learned that waiting is safer than reacting, that silence can be armor if worn long enough. Still, sleep becomes elusive again, and the road returns to his dreams, longer now, stretching without horizon. In offices where decisions are made, the question arises quietly. Does this warrant reopening anything? The answer arrives in pieces. There is nothing actionable. There is no direct contradiction of the acquittal. There is no new suspect the law can touch without speculation. The system exhales and moves on, recording the development in language that acknowledges significance without promising consequence. It is the kind of language built to survive scrutiny. Public reaction is muted. A short article runs online, shared briefly, commented on by the faithful few who never stopped watching. Most people scroll past. The world has learned to ration its outrage. Cold cases no longer compete well with fresh disasters. Attention is finite. Absence is patient. The detective who once thought he'd left the case behind reads the article over breakfast and feels a familiar pull. He doesn't act on it. He understands now that some pursuits cost more than they give back. Still, he drives the road again that afternoon, not stopping, just passing through, nodding to a place that shaped him more than any solved case ever did. Years stack on top of years. The artifacts from the storm settle into evidence storage alongside the rest, tagged with dates and caveats. They become part of the case's sediment, another layer future eyes might examine differently. Or not at all. That's the bargain time makes with truth. The family grows older. Their world narrows in expected ways. They speak less about the case and more about ordinary things, health, weather, grandchildren. But sometimes, unprompted, one of them will mention the road or the night, or a detail no one else remembers. They don't seek validation. They don't need agreement. Memory for them is not evidence. It's continuity. The acquitted man reaches an age where the future feels shorter than the past. He wonders occasionally what he would say if someone finally asked the right question. He isn't sure whether such a question exists. He isn't sure whether truth, when spoken too late, still counts as truth or simply becomes another version of the story. He keeps these thoughts to himself. Some answers he has learned don't improve with daylight. County Road 417 continues its quiet work. Cars break down. Teenagers sneak off to park where they shouldn't. Rain floods low spots and recedes. The land holds all of it without hierarchy. Tragedy does not elevate itself here. It simply happens, then becomes part of the soil. Cold cases don't resolve the way people want them to. They don't rise neatly to the surface when summoned. They sink, diffuse, become inseparable from the environments that produce them. This one has done exactly that, spreading into memory, into cautionary advice, into the subtle ways a town learned to be careful without knowing why. If there is an ending, it is not dramatic. It is the slow acceptance that some truths remain intact precisely because they are untouched. That knowing everything is not the same as understanding. That justice, as a human construct, sometimes reaches its limits and stops, even when the story does not. The open door still exists conceptually as a moment suspended in time. The keys remain sealed, unchanged, metal indifferent to meaning. The road stretches on, carrying strangers who will never know why their passing matters. And somewhere, beyond courts and files and memory, the truth remains complete. Not louder, not weaker, simply whole. It does not chase recognition. It does not demand belief. It waits, as it always has, confident that time belongs to it more than to anyone else, confident that even if it is never spoken, it has already happened, and that, in the end, is the one thing no verdict, no storm, and no silence can ever undo. Eventually, the case stops being something people check on and becomes something they check against. A reference point. A quiet measurement of how much time has passed and how little has shifted. When new disappearances happen in neighboring counties, someone always asks if it feels the same. It never does. Each absence has its own gravity, but this one taught everyone how heavy silence can be. The artifacts recovered after the storm are reviewed once more, years later, when a regional task force conducts a sweep of unresolved cases approaching their third decade. Fresh eyes, familiar limits. The buckle is examined under improved imaging, its manufacturer traced to a narrow window of distribution. The warped plastic is identified as part of a casing no longer produced. Useful details, interesting details, details that refuse to become answers. They tighten the circle without closing it. A technician notes that one fragment shows signs of deliberate placement rather than chance. It's a careful observation, logged without emphasis. Deliberate doesn't mean malicious. It doesn't mean meaningful. Simply means someone acted. That has always been true. The case doesn't need reminders of that. The task force recommends no further action. The memo is precise and humane. Resources must be allocated where impact is most likely. The language is correct. It always is. The case returns to its shelf, a little heavier now with context, a little less likely to be disturbed again. The family receives a final update framed honestly. No breakthroughs. No next steps. They accept it with a calm that surprises even them. There is grief in that calm but also relief. The waiting has been its own sentence, one they have served without appeal. They do not ask what comes next. They know the answer. On the anniversary that follows, they gather privately. No cameras. No statements. They light candles and speak names and let the night close around them. It is not closure. It is continuity. It is choosing to remain intact in a world that offered no conclusion. The acquitted man hears nothing this time. No rumors. No calls. The absence of noise feels different now, not threatening, just final. He understands that the story has settled into a form that no longer requires his participation. He is a footnote that refuses to fade completely but no longer dictates the page. He feels something like gratitude and something like loss, and he doesn't try to separate them. He stops dreaming about the road. Or rather, the dreams change. They lose urgency. The nights become quieter. Age does what verdicts could not. It dulls the edge of anticipation. He thinks less about what people believe and more about what remains when belief no longer matters. The answer is smaller than he expected. The town marks a milestone without ceremony. 25 years since the disappearance. A brief mention in the local paper, careful with language, respectful of distance. No new quotes. No speculation. Just a line acknowledging time. Some readers pause. Most do not. Memory has a shelf life unless it is fed, and this one has learned how to survive on very little. County Road 417 is widened again, this time for safety. The shoulder becomes a lane. The culvert is replaced entirely, its old structure removed and hauled away. The work is efficient, indifferent. If anything was ever hidden there, it is gone now, redistributed, anonymized by progress. The land exhales and accepts the change. It has learned how. A historian compiling an archive of regional crime interviews those willing to talk. He records their voices, their pauses, the way they look away when describing certain nights. He understands that accuracy is not always the point. Preservation is. He labels the files carefully, aware that someday someone will listen not for answers, but for texture. In the recordings, the case sounds different. Less sharp. More reflective. People speak about it the way they speak about weather events that altered routines but not identities. It becomes part of the town's self-understanding. A reminder of vulnerability rather than fear. That shift feels important though no one says it aloud. The keys are moved to a new storage facility when the old evidence room is renovated. A technician scans the barcode, logs the transfer, seals the container again. The metal catches the light briefly before disappearing into controlled darkness. It has outlived every narrative built around it. It will likely outlive interest. Cold cases age into artifacts. Not solved, not forgotten, but contextualized. They teach by existing. They remind systems of their limits and people of their endurance. This one has done both quietly, without demanding reverence. If someone were to ask now what happened on that night, the answers would vary less in content than in tone. There would be fewer accusations, fewer certainties. More acceptance of ambiguity. More willingness to say we don't know without feeling diminished by it. That, too, is a kind of progress. The truth remains unchanged. It has not softened with age or sharpened with analysis. It is exactly as it was in the moment it occurred, complete and indifferent. Whether it is ever spoken aloud matters less than it once did. Lives have been lived around it. That fact stands. The open door exists now only as an idea, a shorthand for vulnerability, for the instant when normalcy slipped. The road continues to carry strangers forward, unaware of the weight beneath their tires. The case rests where it has always rested, not at an ending but at equilibrium. And so the story does not close. It settles. Into records. Into habits. Into the way people look twice at empty roads and then keep driving. It becomes part of time's inventory, neither resolved nor unresolved, just present in the long accounting of what was lost and what endured. That is how cold cases survive. Not through answers but through persistence. Not through noise but through the quiet refusal to disappear completely. This one remains exactly that, still, patient, intact, asking nothing more than to be remembered as it is, without demand for an ending, without promise of relief. existing simply because it always has. What remains after endurance is not resolution but residue. The kind that settles into systems and habits so gradually no one notices it forming. In the courthouse, the case number still exists in the database, searchable, dormant. It has been migrated through 3 software upgrades, its fields reformatted, its attachments compressed and reattached, each transfer shaving off a little context, a little warmth. Digital permanence has its own way of eroding things. A clerk, tasked with cleaning legacy entries, hovers over the option to archive. Not delete. Never delete. Just move it somewhere deeper, quieter. She pauses, reads the summary, recognizes the road, the year. She leaves it where it is. Some things feel wrong to bury further, even when no one is looking for them. The historian's archive opens to researchers by appointment only. A graduate student listens to the recordings with academic distance at first, then less of it. She notes how often speakers contradict themselves without realizing it, how memory edits not for accuracy but for survival. She writes a paper about narrative decay in unresolved cases, cites the interviews anonymously, argues that ambiguity functions as a social adhesive rather than a flaw. Her advisor calls it thoughtful. The case becomes theory then footnote. The family receives a copy of the recordings. They listen selectively. Some voices are too familiar. Others are easier to bear. They hear their younger selves sharper, more urgent. They hear how time softened them without asking permission. They don't correct anything. The record doesn't need refinement. It needs honesty even when honesty is uneven. The acquitted man's health begins to fail in unremarkable ways. Appointments, medications, waiting rooms with muted televisions cycling through headlines that feel distant and interchangeable. Occasionally, a segment about cold cases flashes across the screen, generic and safe. He looks away not because it hurts, but because it no longer belongs to him in the way it once did. Ownership has shifted. It always does. He writes nothing down. No memoir. No explanation. He understands now that explanations compete with stories, and stories almost always win. Silence, he decides, is the only thing that hasn't been misinterpreted yet. He commits to it fully. County Road 417 gains a new feature. Reflective markers installed along the shoulder after a minor accident draws attention to poor visibility at night. The markers glow briefly when headlights catch them, then vanish again. A rhythm of appearance and disappearance. No one comments on the symbolism. Symbolism, like truth, does not require acknowledgement to function. A local teacher mentions the case once in a civics class while discussing the difference between legal outcomes and moral certainty. A student asks if they ever found out what really happened. The teacher says no. And that matters too. The student writes it down, unsure why it feels important. Years then further. People who once spoke with authority about the case begin to die. Their obituaries mention careers, families, service. The case is absent from those summaries, as if it were a private language shared only with the living. Knowledge disappears not in revelations but in funerals. The evidence storage facility undergoes another audit. Space is limited. Decisions are made. Some items from unrelated cases are released, destroyed, returned to families. This case is reviewed again. The recommendation is unchanged. Retain. Indefinite. The keys remain sealed. The phone remains dark. The fragments from the storm are nested among them, quiet additions to a long silence. Cold cases don't haunt because they are violent. They haunt because they are unfinished. They deny the mind its preference for arcs and endings. They resist the structure we use to make sense of loss. This one has done that for so long it no longer feels disruptive. Feels instructive. The town hosts a festival one summer. Music and food trucks lining streets that once emptied early. Laughter replaces caution for a weekend. Visitors come and go. The road is busy, efficient, forgettable. Progress does not announce itself. It simply occupies space where fear once lived. Late one night, long after the festival has ended, a car pulls over briefly near the widened shoulder. Hazard lights blink. A driver steps out, checks a tire, adjusts something unseen and leaves. No one notices. No one records it. Nothing comes of it. The moment dissolves into the night like countless others. The land does not differentiate. The truth remains untouched by all of this. It has not been pressured into clarity or blurred by neglect. It is not strengthened by attention or weakened by time. It is complete in a way that human stories rarely are. That completeness is what makes it so difficult to reach. If someone were to uncover it now, fully and without dispute, it would feel almost intrusive, like interrupting a long-held silence that had learned how to exist on its own. People would listen. They would react. And then they would adjust, as they always do. The world is very good at absorbing shocks. Until then, the case continues as it has learned to continue. Not loudly, not urgently, but persistently, embedded in systems and memory and geography, asking nothing of anyone, demanding no conclusion. The open door remains a moment, not an object. The keys remain evidence, not answers. The road remains a road doing what roads do best. Carrying people forward, indifferent to what they pass over. And the cold case, now decades deep, does not fade. It settles further into time, patient and exact, content to exist without permission, waiting not for discovery, but for the simple acknowledgement that some truths do not need endings to remain true. At a certain distance, time stops behaving like a line and starts behaving like a field. Events no longer recede, they spread. The case now exists everywhere and nowhere at once, diluted into references and instincts, into the way officials phrase emails and the way locals avoid certain turns without knowing why. It has crossed a threshold where resolution is no longer the point. Persistence is. The courthouse upgrades its security systems. New cameras, better lighting. A plaque honoring victims of crime is mounted near the entrance, tasteful and general. Names are not listed. Absence is implied rather than enumerated. People pass it every day without reading closely. Memorials work best when they blend in. The historian receives a request from a national archive to include the recordings in a broader collection about unresolved American cases. He hesitates, then agrees with conditions. Context must be preserved. No sensational framing. No promise of answers. The files are duplicated, backed up, mirrored in distant servers. The case achieves a new kind of permanence, one that does not rely on attention. It becomes data with a pulse. A researcher listening late one night notices a pattern in the pauses between answers, a rhythm that repeats across interviews taken years apart. She flags it as interesting, not useful. Interesting is as far as many things get. Still, she writes a note to herself and moves on. The note remains, waiting. The family downsizes. Fewer rooms. Fewer things. They keep the box with letters and clippings, though they rarely open it. Possession has changed meaning. The weight of objects is no longer comforting. They prefer light. They prefer what can be carried easily, what does not ask to be explained. They visit the road less often now. Not because it hurts, but because it no longer feels necessary. Memory has detached from place. Travels with them. That feels like progress, though they would never use that word. The acquitted man enters a season of life where reflection arrives uninvited. He is careful not to confuse reflection with confession. He understands the difference. He sits on porches and watches weather move in without trying to predict it. He has learned that anticipation is a form of control, and control is often an illusion. When asked about the past, he says very little. When not asked, he says nothing at all. In the evidence facility, a policy changes. Long-term retention items are reclassified for periodic review, rather than permanent hold. The case is scheduled for assessment again. A committee convenes, reads summaries, notes the absence of actionable paths. The recommendation remains the same, phrased with updated language. Retain. Monitor. Reassess if conditions change. Conditions rarely change on their own. Cold cases do not age uniformly. Some calcify. Some evaporate. This one has stratified, layered with attention and neglect in alternating bands. Each layer tells you more about the era that examined it than about the night it began. That too is information. The town commissions a new map. Roads renamed. Boundaries adjusted. County Road 417 retains its number, but its shape is different now, smoothed and widened, safer by design. Safety arrives late and without apology. It does not undo anything. It simply reduces the odds going forward. A driver unfamiliar with the area pulls over one evening to check directions. The phone struggles for signal. The air is still. For a moment, the place feels heavier than expected. Then headlights approach, the moment breaks, and the driver moves on. Nothing attaches. Most moments don't. In a classroom far away, a student reads a case study drawn from the archive. No names, just variables. She underlines a sentence about endurance and writes human cost in the margin. It's an honest annotation. She will forget the specifics. She will remember the feeling. The keys remain sealed. The metal has dulled slightly, time working at a scale it prefers. The phone remains silent, its battery long since irrelevant. The fragments from the storm sit nested and labeled, their significance neither increasing nor decreasing. Evidence does not yearn to be understood. It waits. If the truth were to surface now, it would arrive into a world that no longer expects it. That might be its best chance. Surprise has a way of slipping past defenses, but even then, the truth would not restore anything. It would simply realign understanding, shifting weight from one place to another. Relief and grief would coexist without hierarchy. Until that improbable moment, the case continues in its chosen state. Not suspended, not resolved, just present. A fixed point against which time keeps moving. The open door has become an idea people use without knowing its origin, shorthand for vulnerability, for the instant when control was misplaced. The road keeps carrying people forward, indifferent and efficient. The town keeps living. The systems keep updating. And the cold case, no longer headline, no longer warning, rests where it has learned to rest, inside the long patience of time. It asks nothing, promises nothing. It remains exact and unmoved, not waiting for an ending, but proving by its continued existence that some stories do not conclude. They endure. By now, the case has outlived its urgency. What remains is not pressure but presence, a low, steady awareness that never fully recedes. It surfaces in moments that seem unrelated, when a policy memo references legacy files, when a map redraw erases an old boundary, when someone hesitates before saying the word closure because it feels too absolute to trust. A new generation of investigators trains on digital simulations, learning how to interrogate data rather than people. They study cold cases as ecosystems, inputs, decay rates, interference. This case appears on a screen briefly, anonymized, stripped of texture. A student asks why it was never resolved. The instructor says, because not everything leaves enough behind. The answer is technically correct. It is also incomplete. The archive grows heavier as more cases are added around it. Weight without mass. The servers hum in climate-controlled rooms, preserving voices and images long after the bodies that made them are gone. Somewhere in that network, the story waits alongside thousands of others, differentiated only by metadata and the quiet insistence of its details. The family reaches a point where remembrance no longer feels like obligation. It becomes preference. They choose which stories to keep alive and which to let rest. They stop correcting people when facts blur. Accuracy has lost its sharpness. Meaning has not. They know who they lost. That has never been in question. The acquitted man watches the news less. He has learned that distance can be an act of self-preservation rather than denial. When he hears the phrase cold case now, it lands differently. Less like an accusation and more like a category he once occupied and no longer controls. He understands that his life will always be footnoted somewhere, but footnotes do not define the text. They annotate it. The road undergoes one more change, subtle and unannounced. A drainage improvement. A smoother curve. Engineers solve problems without knowing their history. The past is not consulted. The future is optimized anyway. At night, headlights still sweep across asphalt and disappear. The physics remain reliable. The meaning does not. A passerby leaves flowers once, anonymously without explanation. No anniversary. No note. Just a small arrangement placed near the shoulder, gone by morning. Wind animals time. No one claims it. No one investigates. The gesture stands alone, complete in its anonymity. Cold cases don't need caretakers to persist. They need only to have happened. This one has crossed into that category fully now, sustained by the fact of its occurrence rather than by ongoing effort. It is carried forward passively, the way certain stories are carried, embedded in reference materials and cautionary phrases, in the shared understanding that some questions do not yield. If someone were to stand on County Road 417 tonight, they would hear what anyone hears on a quiet road. Insects, distant engines, wind through scrub. Nothing would announce itself as significant. That is how time wins. Not by erasing but by normalizing. The keys remain sealed, unremarkable to anyone who does not know why they matter. The phone remains inert, its silence no longer dramatic, just factual. The file remains open in the narrow sense that it has never been closed, and closed in every way that counts. Truth does not grow impatient with age. It does not decay. It does not adapt to narrative needs. It stays where it was placed, exact and unresponsive, waiting not for discovery but for coincidence, for alignment, for the rare moment when conditions converge without intention. Until then, the case exists as it has learned to exist, without urgency, without demand, a quiet constant in a system built for resolution, reminding it of its limits. A story without an ending, not because it resists one but because it does not require it. And so the road continues. The town continues. The people continue, each carrying their own versions of what was lost and what remained. The cold case remains too, not frozen in time but settled into it, unchanged by neglect or attention. It does not ask to be solved. It does not ask to be remembered. Simply is.